be able to have time to give this our full attention. And if you could make sure to let us know ahead of time what you would like from us today, or any feedback, or anything we should be looking out for.
Certainly, certainly. So thank you. Well, I'm joined today at the table with our gold champions. I have Dr. Francisco Duran for student success. I have Dr. Jane Lipp for caring culture. Matt Bilkwell, who's also part of caring culture, will be joining us shortly. I have Dr. Sloan Presidio, who is really responsible for all the work in student success. We have Dr. Chase Ramey, who is a gold champion for the career workforce and also has a portion of the work in caring culture. And joining us for her marathon work session today is Kristen Michael, who is our gold champion for resource stewardship. And she will be joining us shortly. So we want to thank you for your input to the strategic plan. I want to remind you all that this is merely an update to the plan that you all approved in June of 2015. As you will have opportunities throughout the rest of this year to have staff bring goal reports to you to talk about the progress of our strategic plan, the input that we're really looking for today is around the changes within the plan. Now, I do want to take a moment just to go through the documents that were posted for today's presentation. Of course, we have the PowerPoint presentation, which is behind me. We also have a strategic plan review, which provides all of the changes that were made to the plan. And you'll note, you noted that as you were looking at the documentation, you can see where we moved information from one section to another. You can see where we merely updated the language for clarity, and you can see where we added whole sections to the plan. In addition, we updated the timelines, and we also added information around estimated costs. And we'll be talking about those estimated costs in just a bit. I also provided a copy of the fully updated plan. Worked very closely with our multimedia department to provide this to you. So this is the fully updated plan that once approved by you at our next school board meeting will then be posted on our website. So again, as I said, this is the plan that you approved over a year ago in June 2015. And I wanted to provide a bit of background as to how we got here. So if you remember back to that time, we interviewed many stakeholders beginning in April of 2014. We held focus groups and conducted surveys with over 20,000 stakeholders responding to those surveys and focus groups. We analyzed a variety of student achievement data, mission, vision, and guiding principles from the board. With your input, we then developed the framework with a broad direction for priorities for the future. With your work, LT collaborated to finalize the overarching strategies, actions, and metrics, and we then implemented the strategic plan. And I'm also going to refer to some of the guidance that you gave us at our last retreat in July, when you asked that we not put as much information into the presentation, but put that information into the supporting documents so that you would have time for discussion. So again, we developed the strategic plan and implemented it in the 2015-2016 school year. We then provided reports to the board with an executive summary in the presentation format with a complete narrative, and we reported out in the timeline which is listed behind me. November for Goal 3, December Goal 1, January was the second part of the Goal 1 presentation, April being Goal 2, Caring Culture, July Goal 4, with the strategic plan review and revisions in July. We then, this past July, met as a board and staff to collaborate on the update itself, where the board provided input and feedback on the actions, desired outcomes, and metrics. The leadership team, after that meeting with the board, we had several meetings where we worked together, and then champions worked individually within their own departments to take your input to make these changes to the plan, to that revised plan that we're going to talk about today, where we're going to provide you new information on the estimated costs around the actions. And again, that's just a broad estimation of costs. We didn't calculate these costs out to the dollar for each of the actions listed. But we wanted to give you a sense, this was at your request, we wanted to give you a sense of how much the work within the plan would cost over time. We provided you some reworded overarching strategies and actions, and that rewording occurred so that we could provide better clarity and accuracy for the community. And we added overarching strategies and actions that better reflected our work, and we revised the timelines. So if you note, for student success, there were no major changes to the desired outcomes and actions within student success. And so for this part of the presentation, we will not be going through those desired outcomes and actions. You would note that in the review that was also posted, we outlined what all those changes might look like. And any changes to this particular section was, again, accuracy in the wording. And we'll note that we did move digital citizenship from caring culture to student success because we felt that it made better sense in terms of the work that we were engaging in. But we did make some changes to the metrics. And so I do want to just take a few minutes to talk about the few minor adjustments that we made to the metrics for overarching strategy 1. You'll note that we removed a few metrics, one being the metric regarding the percentage of teachers effectively integrating technology. As we move into our FCPS On initiative, we'll be developing an accountability plan to address this metric. So we pulled that particular metric out of the school, the strategic plan for reporting purposes. To continue with overarching strategy 1, we removed the metric that was related to SAT and ACT scores because we measured this as part of overarching strategy 4. So we didn't feel that we needed to report out on that particular metric in 2 parts of the plan. For our overarching strategy 2, we removed the passages report as a metric because we've incorporated the passages report really into the entire student success goal report. And so all that good information that the board liked, and the board has liked the passages report for many years, we pulled that information directly into our goal 1 report that was over 2 parts. And so much of that information that you enjoyed is part of that particular presentation. As we look at overarching strategy 3, many of the metrics remain unchanged, but there was a change related to kindergarten readiness. And we removed this particular metric because the current readiness rubric was designed to be used as a tool to support community programs connected to the public schools, promote quality teaching and learning practices, and a sense of age-appropriateness and age-appropriate expectations. So it was really an internal tool that we used, that teachers used for student readiness, and we didn't feel that the data were valid enough to report out to the entire board. But we are looking at future options so that we can report out using the universal screener as a possible way that we can report this information out to the board in the future. So that was removed. And lastly, for overarching strategy 4, we removed the metric related to AP and IB and dual enrollment because it is noted in overarching strategy 1. We didn't want, again, dual reporting out. We are also, we removed the metric related to CTE and work-based internships. We're currently looking for a way to recognize all of those students who are engaged in work-based experiences and not just those who are involved in CTE experiences. Where we did make quite a few changes was related to caring culture. And many of the changes that we made with caring culture, it was a better way for us to align our focus on students and families with our employees. And so we had a fresh face, fresh eyes on the plan this year. And as Dr. Ramey came in, he noted at several of our meetings that I really like the focus on students, I really like the focus on families, but I feel it's very important that we have that same focus on our employees. And so we've added some desired outcomes to recognize and celebrate employee success and improved employee engagement. I'm not going to go through each of those. You can see them behind me, you can see them in the plan. In addition to focusing on our employees within caring culture, we added some language around service learning. And as the former Goal 3 champion for our student achievement goals, service learning is very close to me, it's very close to my heart, and so we felt that it was important to bring back some metrics around the numbers of students, percentage of students engaged in service-oriented opportunities in the system. Moving on, we've also added some outcomes related to employees feeling welcome in FCPS, and we added some metrics to align better with our wellness policy, encouraging them to make healthy life choices. And so now on to some of the metrics within caring culture. The metrics have not significantly changed within caring culture, other than providing some clarity for what we originally measured. We did add a metric related to levels of customer service, and that will be as reported by stakeholders. And as we think about that survey of suites that we're going to engage the public in, engage our stakeholders in, that will be a metric point that we add to that survey of suites. We removed the metric related to improving communications. If you'll note that that data was collected and reported in the Goal 2 report for this particular year. And a lot of the work that we did with our new website, our new branding, came directly from the data in this communication study. We also looked at some of the changes that we made to our current Office of Communication and Community Relations with a reorganization. And again, that the data for that change came out of that survey. We also added a metric related to stakeholder satisfaction and are currently working to identify that suite of surveys to gather this information. For overarching strategy 7, we removed the metric related to the bullying management system because that is included in the bullying incident report. So we felt that we were highlighting two separate pieces that were reported on in one particular report, so we removed that metric. We will also be reporting out on demonstrated citizenship skills for students and health and wellness resources for staff. As we move to Premier Workforce, while Dr. Ramey did make recommendations for changes in caring culture, there are no major changes for the Premier Workforce goal. You'll note that we've only changed some of the metrics for clarity, and you'll note that for overarching strategy 9, the metrics are totally unchanged. And lastly, for resource stewardship, there were no changes to the desired outcomes and actions in resource stewardship at all. The metrics are largely unchanged. We did remove the possible tools that we might use to gather feedback from the community regarding trust and customer satisfaction. But again, we will be building that into that survey of suites that we're going to use to garner feedback from our stakeholders, whether it be students, community, or staff. And again, for our overarching strategy 10, there were no major changes, but we did provide some clarity to the metrics that were there previously. So in terms of next steps, and Ms. Politic, you asked what we would like from the board, as we prepare for the upcoming meeting, we note that this will be up for action on the next school board meeting this week, and that the goal report for 2016-17, the first one being Premier Workforce, will be presented in November. And so really, we're looking forward to the board accepting these changes at the next board meeting and approving this strategic plan.
Thank you.
May I just kind of wrap up a little bit? Thank you, Marty. You've done a great job. First of all, I want to compliment the board. I think you've done a great job on the development of this strategic plan. You put 14 months of work into it, so this is really only meant to be representative of the fact that it's a dynamic document, right? And there should be some updates every year, but there shouldn't be wholesale rewrite of the strategic plan. I will tell you, the plan is doing what I think it's supposed to do, and that is keeping us focused on the things that we said we were going to do. And so when I look back this past year about how much has been accomplished, you know, it was all laid out there in the plan. So I believe the team has done a great job of focusing time, energy, limited resources on the things that we said were important that we would do. So I'm very proud of the plan, and I understand from other school systems across the country, they are looking at it as a great model, as others are looking at strategic plans. Now, Most strategic plans do not have cost tied to them, but I know that you all have wanted us to add some measure of how much might that cost. Now, as we move forward, when we develop annually a budget and we put in a budget any one of our strategic items, we do develop work plans that very specifically lay out the cost. But because some of these things are in the future, and some of them we could spend an inordinate amount of time and energy costing them out and not even do them, and then that costing may look different the next year, you know, that's why a lot of strategic plans do not have detailed costs. So it was my ridiculous idea to you know, like you do when you look at a restaurant. I said, okay, let's just give a kind of a, you know, kind of a general idea. Is this a major cost item or not? And it may have been a bad idea, I don't know. But it was at least just to try to give the board, maybe the community, as we move forward with execution of the plan, which of these items potentially will have a more significant cost to us, is, you know, what will be heavy lifting for us, maybe not so much. And so I hope that kind of works for you. On the metrics, as we did last year, please know that we're not tied to all these metrics. These are the things that we're certainly collecting as we go. But you remember last year, as we presented each of the goal reports, there was additional information you wanted on different things. And we will continue to do that. And what we did is we tried to fold in those things that you asked for last year in those goal reports. We try to represent them in the plan. So I just would remind the board that moving forward, this still will be a living document. You know, it's not set in stone, but I do believe it's serving its purpose in keeping us focused as a system. And so I compliment you all and the leadership team, I believe, for using it in that way. Thank you, Ms. Foster.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garza. I will speak with Jamie and then Megan. Thank you. Any others?
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the update, and I appreciate where you know, either change language, updated metrics, what have you. On page 22, where it's overarching strategy 10, under the new metrics in the first box, disaggregated per pupil spending by program and level, I'm assuming that's the program budget, which was not described in the old metric, and I am pleased that you're including disaggregating per pupil spending by program and level, because that gives, because I assume we were going to continue the program budget, that really gives everybody an idea of what things really cost, and going forward incrementally what it would cost to increase.
So following up on the feedback from when we presented the Resource 4 Goal Report, one of the things is we disaggregated the cost per pupil by program, but we didn't include elementary, middle, and high. And the board had requested that additional information, so we thought it would be very helpful to clarify that in the metrics.
Right, because I mean, that was an expectation, but it was never clearly laid out. And I also, I agree that costing it out, you know, kind of when reviews in a restaurant. I think that that's appropriate. I know that there's a desire by some to have very specific program costs, and the problem is when you're doing a multi-year strategic plan, because our costing is variable depending on the number of students, the needs of students, state funding, county, I mean, they're just, it is always a moving target. But again, the combination of sort of using the restaurant approach and then making sure that we have everything broken up by the program budget level, et cetera, I think that gives enough specific costing idea, because the costing again comes forward when we work on each yearly budget.
Yes, and in an operational budget, we get very precise
Exactly,
and specific.
exactly.
And as you pointed out, it's also nuanced about how the exacting in terms of how it's, whatever activity or initiative we implement, how we do it.
Exactly.
You know, and that's determined as we get closer to the implementation of something.
Right, because there's just no way that you could have a definite cost attached to each one of these. So thank you.
I have Megan, Brian, and then Sandy.
Thank you. I was curious on, I think it's page 8, under culture, overarching strategy 5, revised metrics. The old metric was increased levels of satisfaction with school climate by students, staff, and parents, as measured by a designated suite of surveys, and then it gives a bunch of them. So that's the metric. But then you look under new, and it just says perception of school climate by students, staff, and parents. That's not a metric. I mean, it's not. It might be a goal. It might be even, one could say, a desired outcome is getting to know their perception of our school climate, but I was just wondering why that change was made and maybe help provide a little more clarity, because honestly, the old metric, at least as a board member, led me to understand how the administration would be able to report out to the board and the public on it, and the new metric, so it's strategy, yeah, sorry, I'm going by the PowerPoint.
She's looking at the strategic plan review document,
Yeah,
which is page 8.
yeah, I'm sorry, however it's easiest to pull it up, what I'm referencing is overarching strategy 5 revised metrics. And it's the very first one. Yeah, there we go.
I'll say this about it, Megan. The committee talked a lot about it, and they were trying to get at what it was they were trying to measure. Now, they will still use surveys in terms of students, families, and staff, as we did last year, but they were trying to get at what is it we're trying to measure. And if it has to do with positive school climate, that was what they were trying to get at. So they'll still use surveys in terms of the measurement tools, but they were trying to get at what is it you're trying to measure.
I understand that, but as I've read the strategic plan, and again, I think it's just a matter of clarity for not just the board, but the public. I, to be honest, wouldn't want FCPS to have a public document that's saying this is a new metric. That statement is not a metric. So if you look at all the other ones below, it's the impact of SOSA intervention data. So that's a metric, you can look at that data. Level of student discipline incidents, it's potentially there. It's very vague, but I think you at least understand, okay, what's your level of incidences. Levels of customer service, I'm not even sure what that means. I think it's just helpful that when you're looking at metrics, you want to at least understand what metric that is. And so, in other words, even the old metric where, Dr. Lip, you were saying, well, of course, it'll still be these type of surveys, then why not carry that over? So that you're saying the new metric is going to be, in terms of capturing the perception of school climate by these stakeholders, we'll be doing it through a designated suite of surveys that you listed there. Maybe it's something else besides surveys, that's fine too. I just think your metric has to be actually saying what are you going to, a metric is how you're measuring your progress. There's no metric listed there.
Yeah, so that would be measuring the perception of our stakeholders with regard to climate in our schools. So we would report out on that information. So whatever we garner in the survey, that's what we would report out. We're in the process of trying to identify what those surveys would look like, or what that suite of surveys would be, and actually develop the questions. And so as we develop the questions to get information around perception of school climate, however folks answer that question, we would report that information to the board.
Okay, well, it's just my humble suggestion that even if you just put in there that you're wanting to capture the perception of school climate by these key stakeholders, via, FCPS survey data, something so that people understand what are you going to draw that from.
And we can add that. We were trying to get away from adding the specific surveys in case we
I
chose
totally
to use a
understand that,
different
yeah. So
survey.
I'm saying even if you just
But
say
we can be very
designated
general.
suites of surveys, and if you don't have to say what they are, but that might at least help people understand. So how are you actually going to capture that information?
And that's the same with the levels of customer service, how you develop those questions to get that information from stakeholders. Then we would report out, their levels of customer service to the board. Did you feel that you had adequate customer service when you engage with FCPS staff at the school level, at the central office level, et cetera. But again, we haven't created those questions.
And I think this year will be new for that. Remember, this past year, we implemented the K-12 Insight, which was about employee engagement. And we're looking at this year being an opportunity to survey, continue to survey employees, but also survey students, staff, and maybe the larger community. I think the same thing is true about customer service. We've never really had a metric or means for doing that. So I think down the road, this could be.
As you build it into the
Yeah,
survey.
right. As we know more about what kind of survey we have, what kind of results we can get, I think we can be more specific about the metrics. But I get your point. I think there could be a few little words added.
We
to
can
that.
tweak that.
Yeah, I mean, I know obviously that it's, when you all present to us, the goal is not just so that the board can have meaningful information coming from the system, but also that we can hopefully help you guys, since we are a little bit removed from the intimate work, we're kind of like a set of fresh eyes to say, I'm sure it makes a lot of sense since you're working so closely on it, but somebody who's not so involved, you look and go, I'm not sure what that's telling me, so.
No,
all
we
right.
appreciate that.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. I have Ryan, followed by Sandy.
Okay, thank you. So I do not support the change on overarching strategy 2, moving the passages reports as a standalone document. I think all of us are well aware that I have not been supportive of all of the iterations of the passages report, specifically one in particular. But in general, I find that document to be very informative, and it's something that as a standalone document you can take out to the community, and it gives a very good picture of how our students do throughout their career in FCPS, and it shows what they go off to do in the future. I think if it's incorporated into a larger thing, no offense, I don't think everyone in the community reads those bigger reports. So I advocate keeping that as a standard.
Thank you, Ryan. I now have Sandy, followed by Elizabeth, and then Pat.
Thank you. Appreciate the report. And really just two questions on page 16 of the presentation, slide 16. At the very top, it talks about old metrics and new metrics. The new metrics, it just says levels of the behavioral, mental, and physical health of students as measured how. The old metric, it talks about levels on the survey and the questions. I'm not seeing, is that a change, or are we still using the survey?
We are still using use survey. We just felt like we would have other measurements too that we may want to use. So the use survey gets at all of those areas.
Okay.
And as we've talked a little bit before, the questions have changed again to include more mental health questions, stress, information on suicidal ideation and other areas that, resiliency, other areas that are more current. But yes, we are still using it, and we've also updated the question so that we can look at more national surveys and levels. So yes, that is definitely one piece of it, but we also want to use some of the other measures that we included in last year's report. It's more the qualitative data as well as quantitative data.
And I wonder if we shouldn't be going back to increased levels. We want, improvement in this. And I don't know if you wanted to give a flavor of that, but I think there's one board member I would appreciate that, these survey and other measures. That's just my take on that. And then I may well have missed it, but do we have anything in here that reflects our use of the new universal screener as a tool?
Not yet,
Not
but
yet.
I think that's an obvious piece to be added down the road.
Okay, it's premature to add it now.
Yes, I think it is be up to these guys.
Yeah, I think there's a number of places where we can use that information, but we just completed the RFP process and are piloting the instrument, so it's going to be several years before we would have any, division-wide data that we'd be able to report.
I see, okay, thank you.
And
And with regard to the previous metrics where we talked about the increased levels and increased ratings, we looked at that as possibly a desired outcome. We're looking for an increase. And so we changed that language so that we would just be looking for levels of and report those levels out to the board. Anywhere where we had an increase or we were looking for some kind of improvement, that really is an outcome that we're looking for. So we changed that language so that we would just report out on the data to the board.
Thank you. I have Elizabeth and then Pat.
That's a good point, though. You almost have to go back and look at the plan, to look at desired outcomes, just to show that we're still looking for increases in all these areas. This is just, these are the metrics we would use to reflect that. So I think it's a very good point. You always have to look at the plan in totality.
Exactly.
Of that.
That's very fine. Thank you. Elizabeth and then Pat, please.
So at one point, you had mentioned that Dr. Amy had some suggestions that were not incorporated in the employee caring culture. Is that correct, Mr. Smith?
So no, his changes were incorporated in the caring culture. All of Dr. Ramey's recommendations were incorporated in the caring culture. The previous caring culture had a focus on students and families, and Dr. Ramey felt strongly that we should have that same focus on employees. So the changes to the desired outcomes and actions in caring culture are mostly focused on employees. And again, those are...
Were there other changes that you said that Dr. Amy had suggested that you did not?
Marty mentioned that while I had a lot of input on caring culture on Premier Workforce, there weren't any changes to the metrics, unlike in caring culture, and so we did some rewording of some of the pieces in Premier Workforce, but there weren't necessarily changes to the metrics. You mentioned that.
For Premier Workforce, yes.
Okay, so I was just interested if there were changes that you had proposed that were not accepted, what were they and why not? But if they weren't, it doesn't matter.
No, there were no changes that Dr. Ramey recommended that I somehow kept out of the plan.
And I'm going to also throw in the 2 cents for the new and improved passages report. I do think there is some value in that document as a kind of an overarching glimpse into what we're doing, and it's so difficult. I think we're not necessarily very good at giving an overview of the entire school system in a synthesized way often. And there are communities that we can reach and can communicate. And frankly, it a little bit highlights not only what we're doing well, but sometimes, opportunities for improvement. And that once that document became a better document, I can't think of anything else actually that we have that sort of uniquely provides that kind of a lens. So,
May I add to that, Ms. Schultz? You all mentioned at the retreat that you all liked the summary of the major accomplishments. Do you remember that? The PowerPoint kind of summary. You talked about it was a great document to go out to the community
It was
to
a
talk about.
highlight presentation.
Yeah, it was highlights. In reflecting upon what you said and also you, Ms. Schultz, I wonder if there needs to be almost like a couple of page, 3 or 4 page document that really is more state of the division kind of report. Is that not what you're thinking about? No? So it's still the passages?
It's an and. I think that the couple of pages is a good idea. But what passages does is at a sort of high level is it takes a look at, in your core academics, how are we doing over time, over cohorts, and where is the Achilles heel? And there is a differentiation that happens within that report that comes through with some clarity. And I'm sorry, I actually think it's very, I'm the first one that would have taken a hatchet to that a couple years back, but in its current format, I think there is some salient observing that can be done at a high level that allows us to guide more granular policy outcomes. So I don't mean to be a stick in the mud on this one, but I think it has value and I think it's worth doing.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all of this. It's easy for me to understand the changes that are being proposed, so it's very helpful. Thank you. Just a couple of questions for follow-up, I guess. On page 9 of the presentation, let's see if I can get back there. Where we talk about goal 1 and the metric that you removed, which is the percentage of entering kindergartens who demonstrate benchmark readiness skills. I do think that's a very important thing for us to know, not only for our conversations with the community, to the extent that we're able to have a conversation with the community about preparing kids, but then also if we do any of that longitudinal look at kids, if we have the benchmark to begin with. So I'm just wondering, what are we doing instead to get that look at kids? And is the idea that we're hoping that the universal screener will step in for that? Or what's the alternative right now?
So we're still going to collect that information, and we definitely can make it available to the board. That's not a problem. The question is just whether or not it's really appropriate to use that information to actually report on this particular desired outcome and actions, as Dr. Garza kind of mentioned. It's finding the right metrics for what we're really trying to measure. So that rubric really is not psychometrically sound and designed for that process. It's really, again, more to work with our community partners to think about how to get students more ready that are going to be coming to us not from our preschool programs. So there's a couple different things that I think that we're looking at right now as substitute measures. One, we of course have the multi-year initiative partnership with UVA that's doing the study of our early childhood program. And that's going to give us a lot of actionable data, but we hope some additional instruments that we can use beyond the scope of that study and beyond the life of that study. And then the other types of information, as we mentioned, would be things like early literacy skills, early numeracy skills that we're seeing as students come into the system, and we can test some of those things with the universal screening.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. I think that the UVA study will help us get a handle on, how ready our kids are and then how well we work with them.
And we'll be bringing updates to the board with the UVA study.
Okay, thanks. Then on the, well, I'll come back to passages in just a second. I was also looking at the strategic plan review, and it's the document that has, I don't think we've had it up here. It's the one that has all the colorful dots and then the cost estimate in the right-hand side. That's, okay, thank you. I don't know that we need to pull it up, but just so everybody knows what I'm talking about. Not on any particular page, but I'm looking at the right-hand column, the cost estimate, and I appreciate that this is challenging. But only thing I'm wondering is, as a school board member, are we going to see, as we put together our budgets over the next few years, we will see that we're repurposing some money or we're trying to add some money, and what for tied to the strategic plan? So in other words, I mean, I look at some of these things. There's an example. On page 1, going down to achievement gaps will be eliminated. So it says implement the strategies and resources of the closing of the student achievement gaps plan in all schools, and it steps out yellow, 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 then green over 4 years, and it's got the $2 on. So then, am I going to see as a school, that's important to me as a school board member. I want to make sure that when I vote for the budget, it includes money for that, right? So am I going to see, okay, in FY18, FY19, is this much money to implement this part of the plan, or am I going to have to dig for that? It's a lot of information. I'm not sure we're going to get.
I can't answer that question, but just since you used it as an example, I can give you a little bit more contextual information so you can see how complicated this really is. So the strategies that are in the closing the achievement gap plan, some of the budgetary implications we already talked about in the previous work sessions today, because some of that is preschool funding. So expanding the amount of preschool funding, which we talked about, is in excess of $1 million. That would be embedded and included there. So how we actually go about systematically parsing this out and budgeting it out in a way that's accessible for the board, I think that's something that we're still continuing to look at. But it's very complicated because a lot of these things show up in different ways in different places.
The costing out is, and I'll be the first to tell you, it is not precise. And you probably picked the one item in the whole plan where it's the least precise. Because, we're connecting to the closing the achievement gap plan, which is, you're right, there's so many other references to it here in this document. Pre-K, universal screen intervention, acceleration, and there's a lot of things where there's overlap. So, yeah, I would, as we struggled through this, we either gave you something like this or we left it completely off. And like I said, it's not going to be precise, accurate measures, just to give you kind of an idea. So, like I said, it may or may not really work, and it may cause more confusion than it helps illuminate. Anyway.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean,
Yeah, one that made it a good example of where it's tough.
Well, but I appreciate the effort. I think it's important for us as board members to know, how much is all this going to cost, and especially when you got the big dollar signs there, then we know we really have to be focused on that with our resources. So thank you. That's more to come, I guess, on that one. And on passages, I would just ask, I find myself agreeing with the two board members who have already talked about how I like to see that longitudinal look at kids. So all I'm wondering is if the passages report itself, Marty, I think I heard you say that we've kind of decided to put it aside because we're going to see that information in other ways. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, so in the student success report, all of the information really that we had previously provided in the passage report is contained in the student success goal 1, goal 2 report, or strategy 1 and strategy 2 report. But again, if the board desires to see that in a different format, then obviously that's something that we can accommodate. But our hope was that we would be able to eliminate that report and create some more efficiency by including it in the new report formats that we are putting forward for the strategic plan.
Okay, so all the passages does now is that we take that information that we.
Well, remember when we did passages, we did that high-level response because at the time we had so many student achievement goals and sub-goals, and we reported on them in about 5 or 6 reports to the board, and it was really difficult, I think, for the board and the community to see the high-level information, which is why we created the passages report to do that. But I think the attempt with the strategic plan has been to say, okay, let's try to keep the reporting at a high level so that it is more accessible to the community. And in that way, we've been able to include the information from passages in the strategic plan report. But again, if there's a need to do something different, then that's something that we certainly can accommodate.
Well, thank you. I'm not convinced. I mean, I'm willing to see how it works without the passages report, and then if I find that I don't have the tool that I need, we can come back.
We did do it last year. So I'm just saying we did do it last year. I'm not suggesting that we, if it's something you all need, we'll definitely do it, but we did not.
We roll it right in.
I think as a newer board member, I'm less tied to the old report. Happy to see the new data. I like that old. I said old report, former report. Good. I have Jeanette, and unless there's anyone else who wanted to speak, Young, and then go back to Megan.
Whether this is a minority voice or not, I support Mr. Becker's request to have a passage report to continue.
Okay. I have a question about an unchanged metric on page 7.
Of the presentation?
Of the presentation. So I know we've talked about it and have asked some questions, and you guys have, I don't remember where we landed on it, but it's about the completing Algebra 1 by 8th grade successfully as a metric. The second bullet in that chart. Okay. Oh, I thought there was still something. Okay. I guess I'm still confused as to what we're showing with that, because one question I have is, with the push towards successful completion of Algebra 1 in 8th grade, do we have an increase of students
not completing Algebra 1 successfully in 8th grade, students who may not have been ready at that point. And then what is successful completion? Is a C considered successful, a B, or an A? They could get a C in 8th grade, but an A in 9th grade. Have we advantaged them in some way? And I ask that question only because anecdotally have heard concerns from high school math teachers that they feel that students aren't as ready and prepared in math. And so is a push like this causing that situation?
Okay, then I'll start, and Dr. Presidio can weigh in, because we've talked about this before. This is a very common metric that school systems across the country use to measure themselves, because it is a measure of how well you're doing getting kids ready for the more advanced math in high school and then on to college. Interestingly enough, here in Fairfax, we accelerate even more than this. And it does concern me a little bit, to your point, where we have more and more students taking Algebra 1 in 7th grade. Or maybe it's in 6th grade. But it is a pretty traditional metric at 8th grade, because if you don't take Algebra 1 in 8th grade and you are an advanced math student, you're going to have a hard time being able to take all the advanced math courses in the high school level and finishing that sequence. We're atypical, I think, on this metric for those reasons. I think we typically accelerate even more than this. Dr. Presidio knows a lot more about this than I do, so I'll let him weigh in.
We do, and I mean, I think it goes back to some of the conversations I think that the board had last year with new board members coming on, and I participated in one of those discussions about the idea of, how much do we want to encourage acceleration in math, and how much acceleration is too much acceleration. So the reason it's here, as Dr. Garza stated, is because it's a very typical measure that you look at to look at the health overall of your student population in terms of achieving those advanced math and science benchmarks. And we do accelerate much more than this. We do have many 7th graders that are taking Algebra 1. And I think that's typically where we see the concerns from high school teachers feeling like maybe students were accelerated too much, is when the students are skipping 7th grade math, because there are some key concepts and some developmental things that sometimes we're seeing as problems. For a small percentage, again, it's not the overwhelming majority by any means, but for a small percentage of our students when they reach the high school level.
All right, I'm not against advanced math, I'm all for it. I just, if that's a metric, and so that's something I don't want to inadvertently be pushing students who aren't ready, who could do better the year later, or whatever the case may be. But if, I guess that's the standard educators are using. That sounds like that's.
But I think down the road, I think there is another conversation to have at some point, and it's more about, and I agree with Dr. Presidio, I think we hear more about it from our high school teachers for those who really started like in a 7th grade taking one. It's very difficult to compact the curriculum appropriately for students that start accelerating that early, because they miss some really important concepts that are middle school concepts. So it goes far deeper than just this metric for us, I think.
I have Megan, Sandy, and then
I had to go back, so if you need to let.
They're all go back.
Oh, we're all go back
No,
now?
I'm not go back.
Oh, sorry.
I won't go back.
Okay.
Excuse me, you did go, because you said I support Mr.
I'm just-
Acme.
Come on.
And we have 10 minutes.
Yeah, on this particular one, I just wanted to add comment to that. Those, I don't know whether many of us were there when we were many years ago. I don't know how long it was, that when we discussed about having Algebra 1 as one of the achievement goals for the school system, was we also needed to have that to make sure that we challenge our students when we're talking about especially student achievement gap and not just high level math, but also science courses, because you need to have a certain level of math to do well in certain science courses, and we wanted to make sure that we encourage all of our students to do well in science as well. That's why we want to be intentional what is our goal.
Tammy, and then Megan and Sandy.
Regarding the math studies curriculum, I think I have spoken to some people. I know I've spoken to Dr. Garza on this issue. And, you know, I think we need to look when we talk about equitable access for all students. We look at it in different ways, and I think when you look by region and you look by pyramid, you see some of the things that happen as kids get to the upper levels, you know, the SAT scores, the, you know, the, what's the, and I'm drawing a blank, I'm sorry, the National Merit Scholarships, things like that. I am very concerned when we look at that on a regional basis about what we're seeing. And it's not just, you know, I always say, and I think we as a school system do not make excuses for poverty at all, and I don't think we make excuses for students. I think we do everything possible. But some of the factors that, it's not taking these factors of poverty or some of this, the other things. This dearth of some of this equitable falls across all socioeconomic lines in some of these areas. And it's just been years, and we've talked about this, and I am very hopeful that we look at this in a region, you know, region by region basis, pyramid by pyramid basis, because there is something going on there that is not happening the same way. It's not happening in one area the way it's happening in another, where the scores at the end would be more indicative of what we're seeing in other parts of the area. You're all shaking your heads, you all know, and go on.
You did a lot about that with the magnet program that pulls kids out of their high school on those programs. Did you see a long list of all those kids at TJ on National Merit? Part of it.
That is, but, you know, going back, you know, obviously I'm speaking about my region, and the percentage of kids that get into TJ from my region is always, a percentage of the whole is not the same as the percentage of the whole as the other, it's much less. So we've been talking about that, and I know it's not, you know, it's difficult, and I know you've been working on it, and I just didn't want this strategic plan that cannot be passed by. You say that, and I think when we talk about equitable access for all, it's a multiplicity of factors, not just the ones you might think of when you're first talking about it at first blush. So thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. Megan, and then Sandy?
Yes, I know we're under a time crunch, but I did want to quickly point out on page 3 of, the strategic plan review. So it's under Student Success Overarching Strategy 2, looking under desired outcome. Grading will be an accurate reflection of learning, and under actions. It says develop and embed professional development for teachers regarding the purpose and appropriate amount of homework. And as I understand it, you've been developing that this past school year, this current school year, and hopefully implementing for a year from this fall. And I just wanted to tell you, as a parent of a junior and 2 recent grads, how thrilled I am to see that there. You know, we know from hearing from our families that junior year is considered, you know, one of the most rigorous years that kids have in high school. And I'm sitting here as a worried parent looking at, again, large volumes of homework. And I know we have caring teachers. I think it's just a matter of trying to have that much needed conversation about quality over quantity. What does a college course actually do? And I shared with you all last spring, I held up a 3rd quarter assessment of an AP history class with 26 assessments in one quarter. That would be 56 assessments over a college semester. There's not a college professor in the country who gives 56 graded assessments. That's real. That's what we have to wrap our arms around. And so when we talk about a caring culture, when we talk about student success, we have some of our most successful students saying, I like being challenged. I feel that I can master the material, but there are only so many hours in a day. And so I really wanted to do a shout out, Dr. Garza, to say thank you. Ms. Hines and I came to you 3 years ago after Mr. McElveen had done a countywide student leadership summit at Woodson High School 3 years ago, and the students were talking to us then. So to see this in writing, to know that we're, really intentionally recognizing this as part of our strategic work, I just really wanted to call attention to it today, and to thank all of you sitting here before us, because I know you're all working on it in different ways too. And you're going to hear me talk about a lot this academic year. I'm sorry, just preparing in advance.
Thank you, Megan. Sandy, and then I will give some final remarks.
Just wanted to go back to the algebra one. I've long had a concern about this being a measure for a number of reasons. I just think with math, algebra one in particular, you need to provide that whenever a child needs it. It's so important for the rest of their math life. From that point on, whether it's doing it sooner or doing it later. It's like, to my mind, it's more important the part that they are successful and actually understand algebra one. I think that's more critical. So that's my question when we talk about successfully completing. Is that based on both a certain grade level and passing the algebra 1 SOL?
So we've reported both metrics actually in the report. We've given the SOL performance and we've given grade performance.
And so and that continues to be the metric for then both of those things. Okay. Well, I think it gives me a little bit more comfort that we do focus on the fact that they are successful at it. They didn't just take it and then move on. Because I think that's
Thank you. I think a lot has been said. I did see one thing in there that I appreciated. I don't know if this was Dr. Duran, but adding the designing family engagement with support from the groups and community groups, cultural organizations, having attended some of the neighborhood readiness teams, and recently been invited to speak at a church that was doing a lot for some students whose parents could not be as engaged. I really do hope we do more to bring them to the table and help us make the decisions and come up with strategies. I think it's really powerful. Quick question for Marty. Is there a reason the service learning is only for grades 6 through 12?
So those are the years where we report out on service learning where students actually get points for service learning. So it's the 6th grade year and then your senior year. And then there's a service learning requirement for the middle schools as well.
The 6 and 12, not 6 through 12.
It's 6 through 12.
Okay.
But we certainly do encourage students to take advantage of service learning. It's for 6th grade, we look at service learning over the course of your entire elementary year or elementary time. And just briefly before we close, not with regard to service learning, I just want to publicly thank my colleagues for all of their work with the strategic plan, and I have to also publicly thank Julie Fowler for her work in compiling all the documents and staying on top of everyone to get their updates and information in. It's not always an easy thing to do with leadership team members, and she did it very well, so that's all.
Thank you, and I want to thank all of you, also Susan Kristen and Matt Guilfoyle, who are not at the table here. I know they've done so much work for this. We appreciate it, and thank you for your time. If we could look at next steps. Caring culture, overarching strategy 5, I believe this is Megan's. This is one, add information about surveys to be used to measure perception of school climate. So rather than remove the youth, we mean the youth survey, have it specifically in there. I support adding the qualitative data, but I think we wanted to keep the youth survey survey? Does that capture yours, Megan?
Oh, mine was
I
just
think it was
more.
mine, actually.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's not mine.
Okay.
Okay.
So mine, the top, sorry Sandy, that is mine.
Okay.
Mine, what I just said was, it was very macro level language, just said a dedicated suite of surveys, period. You don't have to list out the actual surveys they're gonna use, but we want the metric to say they're gonna have that perception of school climate through the use of survey analysis or whatever.
Policy versus regulation, have that in there. Never mind, that analogy, okay, thank you. Okay, so we're good with that one, do I need to take a vote, I think we're okay? Show of hands, are we comfortable with the first next step? Good, thank you. Number 2 for strategy 7, was this yours, Sandy?
That was, I actually liked the reference to youth youth survey and other measures, since we have other measures, not just the youth survey. So that was my recommendation, my recommendation to add that in, and if nobody objects to it, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
But it should also include youth survey, because that was taken from a board.
Youth survey,
And other, youth survey and other.
survey and other measures. Thank you. And we're all comfortable with that? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. And then looking at goal 1, student success metrics by region.
Janie? I understand, the reason for that. However, in my particular region, I have the lowest performing elementary school and the highest. And so, I mean, it's great, but I know it's not, the lowest is not. But what I wouldn't want to have is student need being covered up by a high average by other schools, because it's that, so that when you report by region, I am concerned that we will not get, well, we get SOL scores on the rest of it, but we have to be careful that we are seeing the true need of all of our kids. I don't want to have the neediest kids be covered over by the higher achievement of somebody else. And that is something in the olden days in Fairfax County we struggled with. So that is a concern that I have. So, but I understand what you're getting at, but.
I think staff knows what I'm getting after. I don't even know if if we do it by pyramid, because I know the yin and the yang and what's good and what's bad. It just, we have SATs, we have national merit, we have TJ acceptance rates. That does tell us something about where we are. And unfortunately, it's not always good. Do I need additional information by region?
I don't know.
Pyramid? I mean, I'm looking to my colleagues for today.
To Jane's point, I see what she's saying, that, in my region as well, I can see, my region and Janie's overlap, and that probably isn't going to tell me as much as I
Okay,
would like to know.
so let's.
And your reason was had a TJ.
We have a clarification.
So what's this?
Well, I was talking,
Success metrics, I mean,
I was
I
talking
understand
about
what she said,
mathematics.
but up there, that leaves it very broad,
That
so
leaves it
just
very
what do
broad.
we want to?
I was talking about mathematics metrics, because that's one particular one we can look at. I don't know if I have I appreciate that you put that down there, but I don't know if I have exactly what I'm looking for right now. And it may require some additional thoughts, but,
May I suggest something on this? Because I think we have to tread very carefully here.
yes?
I get what Ms. Darren Kovacs is talking about, and I certainly don't want to minimize that concern, because it's an important one. But I also don't want us to rush to add something to this.
I agree.
And then
I'm agreeing
have,
with that.
then have,
I'm agreeing with that.
because people draw conclusions about this information we put together, and some, we don't want to leave people to make, erroneous conclusions. So why don't we spend some time?
And I had
Talking about it?
requested a meeting with you guys.
Okay, I'm
so-
sorry, I had to ladies room.
Yeah, no, that was earlier, it was about when some data came out, and I said, we
Yes.
could talk about this, and it was with myself and I think
We
Ms.
can always add something later on.
Okay.
Well, maybe the next step is consider metrics, you know, not to try and tell you, but even consider metrics like age, is what you're really looking for, equity of access.
Correct.
Okay, so maybe that's something to ponder.
I understand.
Definitely,
Right, I know some things
Sitting in
people
the
have
same
been
chair for-
discussing, whether it's an equity audit or some other way to report it out. So I guess what
Could
do
we say that in the next step, a meeting to discuss further,
Yes,
but not
because
necessarily
that's
adding
where we-
anything to this?
Would be into the plan.
No,
Yeah,
no,
we can
a meeting to discuss metrics.
Or not even mention, I mean, in general,
Is there-
the issues that are impacting equity across the division.
There we go, that's fine, that's good. That's
you
where I
were
want to start.
Thank you.
That's where I want to
Would
start.
be happy to.
I know it's not up there, but a few board members, and Mr. McElveen, who I think had to leave, brought up the passages report. So would it be appropriate to get a read on it?
Yeah.
Okay. So those who, and we were talking about, I believe he said, he's not here, reinstate the report, but maybe have it be updated to fit our current needs, or the fact that we have other reports right now. Is that correct?
How about, Dr. Isaac, could you like maybe go away, hearing what you heard today, and maybe come back to us with a proposal? Instead of us telling you, like, hear what we're saying and think, is there a way to take,
I think we can, meet with some of the team. I think they'd have some great ideas on how we could.
so you could come back to us with a suggestion? That way, we just have.
I would hate to require another report today.
Right,
You know,
feel the
because
same.
I'm not sure we need it, so, yeah, I think. today
So have
require
Dr. Garza and the
another
team
report.
return with a suggested plan for the report. For both, all of this reporting together, can we make that one? Are we all comfortable with that? Okay.
So then we'll make the few changes here and post those for Thursday.
Similar
But we won't be adding anything about passages.
Correct, that would be,
That will be
you
down the
can
road.
start the discussion with the team and figure out how to bring that back to us.
Perfect.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Garson, our school board members, we are finished.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to read this so we can go into closed session. The board will now make a motion to go into closed meeting to discuss some civil personnel matters pursuant. Hello, everybody. You pay attention to this one. To Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1. Do I have a motion? Moved by Mrs. Strauss, seconded by Ms. Hines. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? All abstaining? Mrs. Schultz abstains, and, all right, we will go into closed session in 5 minutes.